See Beneath Your Beautiful podcast is raw and intimate, sometimes funny, and always entertaining. With new episodes every Saturday, Hara explores our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
My name's Nichole Mischke, and I guess I would say that I am a storyteller who's passionate about sharing stories of overcoming toxic shame in our lives. I majored in journalism, worked in news for 6 years, always kind of felt like those weren't the stories that I was supposed to be telling, but I didn't really know what stories I was supposed to be telling until I finally had the courage to share my own story that I had been hiding for a decade, which was that I was struggling with bulimia. And that was so shameful to me and so disgusting and made me so unlovable. So I thought, but in finally having the courage to share that part of me, the part of me that I thought would make everyone run for the hills, I had the most incredible transformation, really even hard to put into words. And it was so transformative that I just thought I need to quit my job and try and figure out a way to help other people receive the same gift through owning the parts of our stories that we are so scared to share because we think they make us so othered. And so that's what Uncovered is. I started Uncovered. It's a storytelling platform, and I help people share their stories of overcoming struggle or some sort of toxic shame in their life.
I really love that. That's sort of what See Beneath Your Beautiful means to me. I think what makes us beautiful is what we've struggled through and come out the other side of.
Absolutely.
And having battled my weight up and down my whole life, finding the love for myself, no matter what my body looks like, overcoming that shame. So that's why I'm so attracted to having this conversation. What did you do at Magic Lantern? What was that about?
So that was my premiere event. It was supposed to be kind of like the launch event for Uncovered, where I had finally felt like I found my rhythm. I was going to have these in-person screenings. Well, that was 2019 November, and then 2020. And so that particular event, we shared 3 of the documentaries that I put together. One told the story of a man who had struggled with suicide and alcoholism. Another told the story of a woman who overcame sexual trauma and self-harm and depression. And then another told the story of a woman who never done a drug in her life, but was in the Army, got injured, had to have surgery, and found herself addicted to prescription pain meds that ended up leading to her attempting multiple times to commit suicide. And those people just courageously sharing, all local to the Spokane area. And they were there in person then to kind of do a question and answer panel afterwards. And I just felt like this is what it's going to look like. And then 2020 happened and we haven't done one since.
It was really powerful and beautiful. And it's just what I hope everybody understands is that we're all fighting our fight. I don't know why we live in such fear of judgment. What do you think about that?
I've done a lot of thinking about this. You mentioned just a second ago, your own struggle with body image. And to me, that's like a whole other thing we can get into. But, I think our greatest desire as humans is to be worthy of love, to be worthy of love and to belong. And our greatest fear is that we're not worthy of it. And so what that causes us to do is manage what we think is acceptable to show people so that we can stay in that space of worthiness and hide what we think might make us be outcasts or what might make people put up some of that judgment that's going to make us feel like we lost a little bit, even if it's just a little bit of that love or respect or admiration. That's still terrifying. Yeah. And so we manage who people get to know that we are instead of just letting ourselves be. And I have a lot of hope because I do feel, and I'm sure you feel the same way, that we are coming into this, like what a beautiful time to live where it is becoming acceptable and encouraged to share our stories and to share our traumas and to not keep all of that inside.
Yeah.
Which I think generations before us kind of were taught is what you had to do.
I'm sure Liz Gilbert, she wrote a book called Big Magic. Well, there was a part in there where, or maybe it was from her podcast, Big Magic. But anyway, she was sharing this story, how this woman wouldn't call herself an artist because she didn't have a degree. And Liz Gilbert suggested she design one for herself, that who deems somebody worthy? And that worthy of love thing is really interesting, because who's the one waving the magic wand that says, you're the one, you're worthy? Worthy is such a weird word to me.
That is so good.
I'm finally giving that up. Byron Katie, people always ask her stuff about being worthy. She's like, what's worthy? I mean, what does that word even mean? Who's the one responsible for dosing that out?
Well, and I think the answer to that, it's ourselves.
Absolutely.
That are the gatekeepers of what makes us worthy. And that's
right.
Something that I really experienced and am now even like wrestling with a brand new layer of that. Let's just strip it back for this one example, which is showing up on social media and sharing parts of my story. You know, when I first left news, I was having like these revelations, like pretty much daily, of I was stepping into this space of this landscape of self-love and self-acceptance and realizing that my story did not define who I was. And I had something to kind of share. And it was so transformative for me to be able to talk about that. And it was my therapy, right? To stay in that good space, to share and to connect with people through that transformation, where I have to believe, though, that I was coming out of a space, news, where it was my job to connect with people on social media. I was told to do that. And so I didn't have to give myself permission to show up on social media for those 6 years previously. And so it was kind of like I was already in this rhythm of sharing on social media because I was expected to do that. If I didn't do it, it's almost like there was a consequence. So I got to kind of come out of that job where it was something that I was supposed to do because someone else told me and kept riding on that wave. But the further away you get from somebody else giving you permission to be a certain person, the harder it is to show up and give yourself the permission to show up, 100% that way. So I've now been out of news for 3 years, and over really, I guess, since 2020, I've kind of fallen into these thought patterns of like, oh my gosh, Nichole, stop talking about yourself. Nobody wants to hear your story. Would you just shut up? kind of thing. And it's been this really big struggle to like realize I have to give myself the permission, and it's okay. That's all the permission that I need. But that is the challenge, right? For any of us to realize that if we have a desire, if we have a passion, the fact that it's even in us to create or become or express that is all the permission we need.
100%.
To go run and go do that. But it's so hard.
I just learned that, I think it was November of 2019. I went to a conference in Toronto called the Archangel Summit. And it was so interesting because that kind of changed the whole trajectory of my life. I went because I've been doing graphic design for 30 years and I love it, but I was a little, I guess, bored. And so I was going to this conference on the East Coast to get reinvigorated for graphic design, or so I thought. And one of the things they said was just that if you have a passion for something, don't quell it. It is what you're supposed to be doing. And that's when I picked up a camera and realized I have a passion for showing women that they're beautiful no matter what they think they look like, and that size doesn't matter and your crooked mouth doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, that's what makes you you and makes you beautiful. I have a real passion for showing people that they're beautiful beneath whatever stories they're telling themselves, whatever they don't think they're good enough about.
Yeah. And I love the work that you're doing with that, like through photography and stuff. And
oh, thank you.
And showcasing that, because I think going back to like the body image problem that we have, I find myself thinking, I still have so much, I think, to learn psychologically what is happening when we get caught in an eating disorder or in a lifetime of dieting. Let me just say, first of all, I think the greatest tragedy that diet culture is putting on us. How many of us are literally living our entire lives chasing, looking a certain way? All of the energy that we're pouring into that, which is going to go away. We're going to get old and saggy and wrinkly and gray. It's going to happen. we spend so much money and put so much energy into chasing that one thing. Like, imagine who we would be if it didn't even have to be a thought in our head.
Right.
That we could just be grateful for the bodies that we're in, and we could move through life with wonder and like not even listening to that. I always think like there used to be a period where people didn't even have mirrors in their house.
Right.
They didn't even know what they looked like. They just got up and they got to work and they started doing. But I also look at like, the Renaissance, or just like the way women's bodies used to be portrayed, right? As the beautiful sculptures. They were soft and they were curvy, and there were no scrawny 6-pack women with buff shoulders, but like, and big butts and giant breasts and tiny waists. Like, but yet we have created this idea that that is what is to be desired, and that it's somehow what should be considered more normal or more worthy of praise and admiration. I mean, how many people have lost weight and had someone say, "Oh my gosh, you look so great." Well,
Right.
what if that weight loss was coming from a disease? We praise smaller bodies so much. And one of the gifts I've received in coming out with my eating disorder has been people who will share their struggles with me in that sense. And I have to say, so many women who work in spaces where their bodies are on display, where whether it's trainers or beauty queens, or, I'm talking big level, like Miss America people or bodybuilders, people who have these supposedly perfect bodies are the majority of the ones who are reaching out to me and saying, "Oh my gosh, I struggle with this eating disorder, and I could never tell people because they think that this is just who I am and that this is what comes natural." And it just is so heartbreaking, because it's like, until we have enough women willing to stand up and say, "I'm done taking these pills to look this way. I'm done abusing my body and hyper focusing on food. Like, I'm done." We're going to just continue to perpetuate this idea to our daughters,
Right.
that like those who don't desire food are more worthy, or it's a huge problem. And I don't know if I know the answers, but
in 2019, I had lost a lot of weight. I was the slimmest I had been for many, many, many years. Like, I can't remember the last time I was that slim. I'm still almost 200 pounds. And then 2020 hit and I gained all the weight back. And I spent most of 2021 in a shame cycle, in this feeling of, who the hell am I to have ever suggested I know what I'm doing, to tell people they're beautiful when I'm feeling so miserable about myself. And I'm so glad that I didn't lose any weight before I found the love for myself again, because I can genuinely say that I am more than my body. I used to say all the time, I'm more than the size of my thighs, but I didn't really mean it. And I didn't believe it. I'm 54 years old and I don't want to waste one precious moment left of this beautiful life. Beauty is who you are, and it's not what you look like.
And that is the goal, right? Because if we can get ourselves to that place of self-love and self-acceptance and quiet that voice, for whatever reason it's telling you you're unworthy, maybe you don't have a degree or you don't have a lot of money, or, everybody has their thing maybe that's telling them, well, you don't belong here.
Right.
Go away until, you've reached this pinnacle, then you're worthy to be here. And if we can get to that place of self-love and acceptance, the true self-love and acceptance, that's when we can become unstoppable. It's a beautiful thing.
The 3 people that were at your premiere, have you followed up with them? Has sharing their stories changed their lives?
Paul Senescal was the man who had shared about struggling with alcoholism and suicide. Actually, he had lost a brother to suicide, which is what kind of sent him into a whole spiral that eventually led him to want to end his life as well. And he will say, hands down, sharing his story is not only changed his life, but it's what keeps him well. It's his purpose to continue to stay sober, because when you start to share your story and you have people respond and say, wow, thank you. Or, look at the Me Too movement, right? It gives your pain purpose. Suddenly, it doesn't have to necessarily become something that you're so ashamed of. personally, I'm grateful now for my experience with bulimia. And I think that that's what sharing our stories does, is it gives it purpose and it makes that pain not feel so raw. So yes, Paul has since come back and done an interview, just kind of like a follow-up interview that's posted on my YouTube page. And Sarah did as well. She was the one who found herself struggling with prescription pain addiction. The thing that stands out to me the most about her story, when I first quit my job in news, which was in 2018, Sarah was the first person to reach out to me and say, I will share my story. But at the time, she wasn't willing to go on camera. She wanted to do it anonymously, which is totally fine. Mm-hmm. Well, some things happened and the initial interview we shot never made it out. And I ended up going back and re-interviewing her a year later. And at that point, she was ready to put her face to it and her name. And she said to me, the reason I wasn't willing to own my story the first time, she has a son who has special needs. And she said, my son is what keeps me alive. He gives me purpose. And I wanted to have my prescription pain meds as an option to end my life again if something ever happened to my son. She's like, I didn't want to have the full accountability of having people to know that this is who I am and this is what I struggle with. Yes, I'm in a good space. Yes, I'm sober from those, but I wasn't fully ready to hold myself accountable. And I just think that's also so powerful because our stories do hold us accountable.
Right.
One of the reasons I knew that I had to share about struggling with bulimia was because I had come to a place where I had stopped. It's not very common, but I woke up one day with mouth sores in my mouth and I believed I had mouth cancer. And I was always worried that I was doing some sort of damage to my body. And is this going to end up killing me? And that day when I woke up with those mouth sores, it was like I literally believed I was dying. I tasted and confronted death. And I don't know if anyone's ever had a scare with a medical issue, but to actually believe your life is coming to an end, it woke me up. And I was like, what am I living for? Right. The purpose of my life is not to chase after physical perfection. That is not a life's purpose. And if my life is about to be over because I chased a certain size of jeans, like what a waste of my life. Right. And so I stopped cold turkey, which initially I was like, great, this is awesome. Like now no one is ever going to have to find out. I'm going to take this to the grave. My husband's never going to accidentally walk in on me while I'm purging because he didn't even know.
Oh yeah.
But I knew if I don't tell somebody about this, what's going to prevent me from falling back into this, it was a prison. I mean, for anyone who's struggled with bulimia and binging and purging, it feels like an addiction. I was stealing food. I maxed out a $5,000 credit card that I secretly purchased food on. I would take food out of the trash can at my house that my husband would toss, or, my husband would leave and I'd run to eat all the food in the house and then run to the store and replace it all and make sure that like the ice cream was carved out just the right way. So he wouldn't expect that I had eaten the whole thing, just like crazy stuff.
I'm smiling because it's very familiar. I totally get it.
It's such a dark place to be stuck in that cycle. And when you're there and you feel like you're never going to get out of it, so to have found that freedom suddenly, I have no idea how. It was grace. I just knew, oh my gosh, I never want to go back there. I have to find a way to share this or I'm going to be sucked back into that really hell prison that just controls your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was one of the questions I had. How did you overcome bulimia?
Well, I have to add to this though, because I did have on my Instagram page, overcame bulimia. Okay. I was like, I overcame this, never going back. Well, I had a humbling moment in 2020 and I didn't share about it for probably 6 months, maybe 8 months. I had been going to a gym for a while. I had pulled in a neighbor who wanted to get back into working out and they had this challenge happening and they were like, you need to track your food. It wasn't like a crazy food program. It wasn't like you can only eat this. It was just like track your food, write down what you're eating and try and, eat mostly vegetables and but try to avoid these sort of foods. And for me, I can't have rules with food anymore.
Right.
Rules with food, going on a diet is literally going to send me into a spiral and I will be binging and purging, and I kind of thought that was going to happen, but I didn't know because I had never invited rules back into my life since overcoming bulimia. And so I told my husband, I was like, I'm doing this challenge, but I don't think I should do this food portion program. I think that's going to really mess with my head. And he doesn't know. He's never had an eating disorder. He was like, oh my gosh, like, it's just like a journal, like big deal. Just do it. It's only for 30 days. So I did it, and like 2 weeks into it, it was the craziest thing because I have way more self-awareness now than I ever did back when I was initially struggling. So I had this part of my brain that was observing myself going, oh crap, like I'm starting to spiral. My thoughts are becoming toxic. I'm literally about to binge and purge. And then the other part of me was just like, well, screw it. And I found myself struggling again, which was a whole other shame spiral, right? Of like, well, now how am I supposed to, I think I can help people overcome their shame when I haven't even overcome mine. And so it was a lesson I think I needed to learn, because there is a huge lie that healing means you're never going to struggle again, or that
Right.
to help people with your story means you have to somehow be at this level of enlightenment and never struggle again. It's not. Healing is a journey. It's up and it's down. And
Yeah.
you can identify with your recovery in a way that's just as toxic as identifying with that mask of perfection that you wore before you outed yourself about struggling with something. And I was identifying with the fact that I had recovered and I've found the way. And now I just know I have to do the things to stay in a good space. And then I need to own it when I mess up.
I love that. That's exactly what the struggle was this year. With my coach, I was like, how do I keep telling these women to love themselves when I'm so down on myself? It was the shame of being slim, saying I knew what to do, and then gaining it all back. That's what it was, because I haven't lost a pound and I feel light and free because I no longer hold myself to a higher standard than anybody else. When you strive for perfection, perfection isn't achievable. And so why would you hold yourself to a standard that you wouldn't hold anybody else to? I think that's so interesting when people talk about perfection.
Yeah.
You don't assume that of anybody else.
No. And the body image stuff is terrible because I think, I grew up a chubby kid and I got made fun of a lot. Like I was way bigger than everyone else my age, which is, I think any of us, when we have these sort of struggles or traumas, a lot of the problems we deal with in adulthood can all be pinpointed back to like, oh, this is when it started, right? In our childhoods. It's so crazy to me. I had this realization a couple months ago, like of all my childhood memories, I could probably write 100 down. They all have to do something with someone pointing out about how much food I was eating or how much bigger I was than everyone else my age.
Mm-hmm.
Just so many memories like that. Not being able to shop in the little girls department. Even when I was in third grade, I had to shop in the women's department, and I was 5'7" in fourth grade and taller than not everyone in the K-8 little private school, but also taller than my teacher. And it was just constant. Like in third grade, I had to have a sixth grade desk and chair. And I remember looking at this chair and everyone else's little desk and just being like, wow, everyone's going to think my butt is so huge. Thing after thing after thing, so many. And because of all those comments, it just ingrained in me, smaller is better, bigger is bad. And also it's somehow honorable not to crave food.
Right.
Like going to a friend's house and having a mom say, oh, wow, you want seconds? Geez, you sure eat a lot, don't you? And I don't think these people mean anything by it,
Of course not. Yeah.
It does affect how you feel about yourself when everyone's saying those things. So yeah, you talk about perfection. As I got older, I'm 5'10" now. I stopped growing in sixth grade or something, but everyone kind of caught up, and then I did kind of come into my own. But I noticed then as people started to say, oh, you're so pretty, it's literally like, oh, the more pretty I can be, the more people are telling me I have value, right?
I see. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just a toxic trap. I don't know.
What kind of work have you done? Have you talked to anybody about that?
Yeah. So, it's, I guess, shameful in one sense and not necessarily. I have not ever done formal therapy, and I would absolutely love to. I think one of those things is that I need to get to the point of is being worthy to spend the money to go to therapy. But I have done a lot of work in the sense of, let me just say, Oprah's Super Soul podcast has literally transformed my life more than anything else. Getting to listen to Deepak Chopra and Gary Zukav and Liz Gilbert or Brene Brown. These people who are sharing truths of the soul, truths of the spirit. That has been my greatest help in getting to a place where I can have that self-acceptance and love.
What does your future look like? What are you working on now? Is Uncovered still your goal?
It is my goal. And it is so scary to have this vision for something and feel 1,000,000% like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And again, it's like, you've got to just give yourself permission to say, I'm not crazy, that I'm trying to make this happen. But yes, I'm actually currently sitting in my very first studio office space. I got a space downtown.
Congrats.
And then now that I have an office space, I have interns that are going to be starting in January. And that's really been the biggest challenge with Uncovered, I think, is, I produce these short documentaries. There's so much time that goes into each one that by myself, I'm only producing like one a month. And that's not enough to create a brand or make anything sustainable. And one a month is if I'm all in focusing on just Uncovered. When I'm also then trying to earn an income, doing things on the side, it's even slower than that. So yes, Uncovered is still happening. My goal is to get to a place where we're sharing weekly content, like twice weekly. And then eventually I would love to do daily content where we have multiple teams of storytellers across the country who are interviewing people and getting these stories out there. There's all this info out there already, right? About shame and about therapy and all these things. But like the gift is giving a person the opportunity to have their story told and heard.
Right.
We can all share our stories with a friend or a family member. Sometimes that's harder because there's baggage that comes with our stories with the ones that are close to us, or maybe someone that is close to us is literally a part of the pain of our story. And so it prevents us from sharing in those inner circles. So to get your story outside of your circle is such a gift. And that is really the basis of why I'm doing this. It was an opportunity that I had to share my story that transformed my life. And so, yes, I know there's tons of stories out there about women that have overcome sexual trauma or eating disorders or mental health issues. When you give that to one person and give them that first chance to share, it's transformative.
So when I came home from that conference, I started Yes, Yes Magic, which is a line from Streetcar Named Desire, which I love, which I have tattooed on my arm. And it was about loving yourself. And I had done some trauma counseling. We talked about something I had been avoiding talking about, which was being touched inappropriately by my sister's boyfriend at the time when I was 7. And I shared my story, and my sister was so upset with me. I'm not upset about even the boy who touched me. I was just sharing it because what I hear you saying, what I agree with so much is that if I tell you my story, one, it releases all my shame because it's out of me. It's not my secret anymore. And also, if you can relate to it, then it's not so scary for you if you've had something similar. But she got so upset with me. And then, boy, I stopped sharing because that's something that's interesting to have to circumvent. I never was upset with her, but she felt like it was her past that I was talking about, not mine. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And that's her shame though, right? Because she hasn't dealt with it. During COVID, my whole family got on a Zoom call and I was like, oh, let's talk about happy childhood memories. And it went south really quickly because they do not like to talk about the past. And there was a lot of traumatic things that happened and they can only go there for some reason. So I just appreciate so much that it's uncovered. It's just the past. Even if it is scary to think about, it's never as scary as you think it is. And the more you talk about it, the more it's released, the secrets, right? Do you think that?
Oh gosh, absolutely. I feel like I was shackled down when I was carrying the weight of this secret for so long. And I remember after I overcame, I'm doing air quotes, I overcame bulimia the first time, even though I was so glad I had quit and no one had knew, like I thought, oh, cool, I'll totally be able to take this to the grave. Like I said, there was this other part of me that was like, I want to share this so bad. I don't want to be carrying this burden anymore, but I don't know who to tell this to because at that point, I'd never met anybody that had ever struggled with an eating disorder in my circle. And so it does make you feel very alone and isolated and other. So sharing our stories sets us free. I mean, that is my mission.
Yeah.
Using the power of owning your story to set people free. You have to own your story to get to self-love.
Right.
You have to talk about it. You have to get to a place where you're not keeping it closeted anymore, because why are you keeping it closeted? You don't think it makes you worthy of love. If you think there's a part of you that is hidden, that doesn't make you worthy of love, even if you think you love yourself, I am telling you right now, there is a whole nother level that you have not yet experienced. You have to own your story. That is the first step to get to self-love. And once we get to self-love, that's where we can really be free. And so that's the whole purpose, using the power of your story to set people free. It'll set you free, and it will set someone else free who's listening, because I guarantee you, even though shame tells you you're alone, no one else is as messed up as you, that is the biggest lie. It is impossible, out of the billions of people and humans that have walked this planet, that you are the only person who has experienced something.
Right.
I knew other people had eating disorders. What kept me quiet was that no one in my circle had owned having an eating disorder.
Had owned
it. But once I owned it,
right.
You know how many people came to me? Aunts, cousins, coworkers, friends I'd had since middle school, who said, oh yeah, been there, struggle with that too. And it was like mind-blowing to me. Yeah. So I believe that with anyone's story, I feel like I'm called to say this, like even if it's incest. I have a friend who has shared that with me. And while she hasn't shared her story publicly, and this is the unfortunate thing about incest, is when the perpetrator in your family is still alive, how do you share that, right? It's going to have repercussions potentially in your life if you share that. It could potentially even be dangerous. But this particular friend said there have been times in her life when she has felt prompted to share with certain people. And when she's listened to that prompt, the people she has chosen, I think it's only like 2 or 3, have said, oh my gosh, that happened to me too. So I also believe in listening to those promptings of your spirit, but it's also the reason why anybody absolutely has the option to share anonymously. We can change your voice, make you sound like a deep, like a deep voice, robot voice, whatever. We can silhouette you. You know, you don't have to put your face and your name to it if it is something that could potentially be dangerous for you. But I don't care how shameful you think it is. I guarantee you there are people in your circle who have experienced the same thing. And until someone's brave enough to talk about it, no one else is going to.
The shame I was feeling that I carried with me that kept me so locked up. I was 7 years old. I think the boy was 16, and he was touching me. And the shame was that it felt good, that I didn't jump up right away. I jumped up eventually and was like, what's happening? But that I stayed there and my body responded. And it wasn't until I did that trauma counseling, which freed me. And she's like, your body is made to respond. And I could forgive that little 7-year-old girl who didn't know what was happening, but I carried it for so long. I mean, this was just not that long ago, 3 years maybe. So I just think it's so important to talk about it, because if she hadn't said that my body's made to do that, I think I would still feel shame that I didn't jump right up. It wasn't like, no, right away. But also he was giving me attention. I was the youngest of 6 kids. There were so many mixed up feelings about it. I knew it wasn't right, but also I didn't get right up. So I just lived with that shame for so long. And I'm just so happy to talk about it, and to talk about it shame free. And that was why it was so hard when my sister was so upset, because I was saying, I'm free. Why is this a shameful conversation now that I'm saying there's no shame attached to it now?
You hit a good point and an important point. The other aspect I've uncovered is I'm bringing in mental health professionals to interview them, because I think we have to understand the neuroscience. That is like the other aspect in being set free. When you can understand that, oh, I stayed there because it felt good, because I have a human brain that's wired to experience pleasure. And when we experience pleasure, we don't necessarily run from it, right? Like there's so many layers to what our brain is doing. And when we can understand this is what a human brain does,
right,
when you experience certain things. Maybe it's that you never told anybody for so long.
Yeah.
Well, as a child, that's a protective mechanism. You know, there's so many things that we can understand about how our brain is functioning that I think also helps set us free, because it's not that you're broken or there's no perversion or broken. It's just the way our brains are. And so I think including that mental health conversation from professionals who can help us understand those things is also hugely important.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Our struggles do not define us. And when you find yourself stumbling and struggling again, don't let that be any reason to keep you quiet or to take your voice away. Like, if anything, that needs to be our permission to be even louder, because you're not the only person telling yourself that you should be disqualified because we stumble again. And that is, I think, the human experience and the human journey, that we're all going to have ups and downs. And shame tells you you're only worthy when you're at an up. And there's so many people that need to hear from you when you're at your lowest point as well. And not saying that you have to share from the lowest point, but once we've been maybe a little bit removed and we can have some perspective, don't hide that part of it, be willing to tell people what your lowest point looked like and how you pulled through.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I just love what you're doing. And if I can just be one more voice, like telling you, keep doing it. I listened to one of your podcasts where you had said, like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. I wanted to scream, do it for yourself. And then if you do it for yourself, it will therefore be for so many others. The way that you're able to help women see their beauty and share that with the world is so incredible. You need like coffee table books in stores with these photos and the stories of the women. I mean, it's really beautiful what you're building. And so just one step forward, keep moving forward.
Put tears in my eyes. Thank you. That's so sweet. Thank you. And like you're saying, when you're called to do something, you just have to do it. It's what else am I supposed to do? Doing what my heart says, because life is short.
Life is so short. It is so short. It is so short. Like, isn't that the thing that we got to get in people's heads? Somewhere on Oprah's podcast that I heard this, but at the end of a life, if we're hearing people say, I wish I had more time, every day that you wake up, that is your more time. You are being given more time. Start using it. Why wait to try and do the thing that is like screaming inside of you?
Right.
This is your time. This is your more time. Go do it.
And the funny thing is that we're also worried about what we look like. Is anybody ever looked in a casket and went, oh, but she's wearing a size 6 now, so that's good. Nobody gives an F what size you made it to.
Right. Exactly.
That's funny.
Exactly. I feel like we are body, mind, and spirit. If we're ignoring any parts of those, we're not functioning as a whole person. So if we hate our bodies or we're obsessed over our bodies, not a whole person. If our mind is sick or we're not a whole person. If we deny any sort of purpose beyond ourselves, being connected to something greater, not a whole person. And so for me, uncovering my shame, even though I was raised Catholic and I thought I knew the idea of what God was, and I thought I was loved by God, once I uncovered my shame, I have this connection to a God, the universe, that was not there before.
Right.
And so I'm so fascinated about like, how do we turn that light on in other people to get them to realize like, you are here for a purpose, like greater than yourself.
Every person.
That there is an energy to the universe and we are all connected.
That was the thing about that conference was they said everybody had a purpose. And I was like, well, everybody but me, until the end of the conference when I was like, oh, me too.
Wow. I love that.
Me too. I have a purpose. And so that's what I want everybody to know. It's exactly what you're saying. And also that the more I love me, the more I love everybody. And that's God working within me, I'm sure. The more I shine a light inside me, it shines out and I can see all the beauty of everybody.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So that's when you first started to pick up a camera again, was when you went to that conference? That's when you started photography?
I didn't get a camera until just 2 years ago.
Really?
Again, I used to have a dark room when I was younger. I always had a camera, but I didn't do it because I convinced myself that I wasn't smart enough to learn lighting. And then COVID happened, which was awesome because I did a 60-day self-portrait series where I learned lighting on myself. And it was great. Wow. So thank you,
That's
COVID.
Amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Your work is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So maybe does that explain why I feel like it's accelerated, like the professionalism of your photos that you're posting and stuff? Like, do you feel like there's been this
every photo shoot, I feel like, oh, I get it now. Every photo shoot, oh, I get it now. Well, this has just really been great. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I'm so glad you said yes.
Yeah, thank you for having me.